Okay. Hi, my name is Lisa Rohde. I'm the Deputy Director of Digital Initiatives at the Graduate Center, and I am the Director of Digital Fellowship Programs, which means that I get to work with a group of GC Digital Fellows who run the GC Digital Research Institute every January at the Graduate Center. Now, what is the GC Digital Research Institute? Well, the Institute is a almost week-long intensive designed to help those people who are less familiar with computational methods and with computer use, especially working from the command line, for example, or working with programming languages, to get an introductory familiarity with the kinds of tasks and research things that can be done with your computer. We begin by introducing how to work at the command line. We do some workshops on data literacy and data preservation and management. We go through 2 different pipelines of languages. So we do a Python pipeline, which includes this year a 3-workshop track. And we do an R pipeline, which includes a 3-workshop track. And then this year we're ending with a workshop on how to do project development and design so that you end with a clear plan for how you want to continue your work. So in the process, what we've decided to do today is I'm going to introduce the Digital Fellows, and then they are going to talk about each of the different workshops that we are going to be offering during the Digital Research Institute. After that, we're going to talk a little bit about the application process. And then finally, we'll give you a chance to do some questions and answers at the end. Please feel free throughout to add questions to the chat, and I'm happy to interrupt and add those and answer them along with the Digital Fellows. But we also have time at the end, and we'll ask everyone to unmute themselves and go ahead and participate in a live conversation. So let me get started by introducing Dee Yoon, who is going to be our coordinator for this year's Institute, and they can get us started talking about what to expect.
Hi, everyone. Thank you, Lisa. So the DRI this year will be held online. We talked about potentially doing it offline or a hybrid version, but felt that for it to be accessible to more people, for it to remain online for this year. So with that said, this year we're doing it a little bit differently. We are going to have 5 days of pretty intensive dive into workshops that are starting you from command line all the way through, if you're taking the Python workshop, right, to intro to Python to slightly more advanced workshops by the end. And the same for the R track. You'll start with command line, and then you'll do intro to R, and you'll end off with kind of data visualizations. So the idea of the Institute is it will take place January 19 to the 25th with a break in the weekend. So it'll go from 19, 20, 21, the weekend, and then 24 and 25. And during those days, we expect that folks will come and attend all of the workshops because each of these workshops are set up for you to build on each other. So missing one of the workshop will make it a little bit more challenging for you to catch up with the other. But of course, if there is things that we need to accommodate, that's something that we can discuss in advance of the Institute. So that is kind of a brief kind of overview of the overall kind of schedule of the Institute. I would show you the DRI website where everything is on, but currently the Commons is down, so our website is down, unfortunately. But the DRI website would have all of the information that we're sharing here right now in this informational session. So you're free to kind of just check in on both ends. So with that said, I am also going to turn it to the different workshop leads who would also introduce each of their workshop to give you an idea of, oh, the Commons is back up. Yay! So the compass is back up. So, as we go through the different parts of the workshop, we would direct you to the website, and so you'll know where to find some of the information. And Lisa has helpfully shared our DRI website, and that's also where you'll find the application form, as well as a short post on kind of, if you're not sure which track to choose and what is right for you. Zach and Leanne wrote a really good write-up to help you get started into thinking about which track to choose. So enough for me for now. I'll now actually introduce Param, who would be teaching the command line and the person you'll meet first in the Institute.
Hello, everybody. Yes, I'm very happy to be teaching the command line workshop for this upcoming DRI. And just to give you a preview, in the command line workshop, which is the first in the series of workshops, we will be using the bash command prompt to begin thinking in a programmatic way and begin understanding how computers interpret and execute the code that we write. So we're going to be doing a number of really fundamental actions, like we'll learn how to navigate the folder directory, how to create files, how to create folders. And we'll just be doing these really elementary but important actions, which will give you the baseline knowledge when you continue in the R or the Python tracks. So that's the first workshop you'll be doing.
Should you choose the Python track, you'll start off with an introductory course, Introduction to Python, which will teach you some fundamentals of coding generally, just using the Python language. We'll be defining and also using fundamental elements such as data types, variables, and functions to begin programming. And then you're also going to learn about basic control flow by writing some very small programs with loop and conditional statements, and eventually pulling some of those into functions, which will be expanded upon later in the track. We'll also be just sharing with you some general practices for going deeper into your own understanding of the languages, sharing some researches, how we also got to where we are with our current knowledge of the language. So this introductory course will be followed by a course led by Rebecca.
Great, thanks so much, Chelsea. So in the course following Intro to Python, we'll be working with a Python package called Pandas. And Pandas allows us to work with data sets. So we'll be learning we'll be using Pandas to wrangle data, clean data, display the data, visualize the data. So it's basically, the way to think of Pandas, it's like Excel, but a lot more powerful. And it all operates, using Python, and we'll be doing that in Jupyter Notebook, which is an environment in which we can use Python that is very useful for visualizing, for actually seeing data and creating visualizations. It's great because it saves your code. So we'll be learning this platform while also learning Pandas, which are both very useful. And I will pass it on to Lisa to do text analysis in Python, right?
Actually, before that, I'm just gonna share the schedule. I forgot that I could do that. Let me share so you get an idea of where you will be. Yes.
Okay, so we've talked about the command line. We've talked about there will be a data ethics and literacies and data management workshop. We've talked about introduction to Python, Jupyter, and Pandas. This is all in the Python track. One other workshop that you'll have is an introduction to text analysis using the Natural Language Toolkit, or NLTK, which is a package that works with Python. You'll be doing this in Jupyter Notebooks, which Rebecca already described, but another way of thinking about it is a web browser mediated way of interacting with Python and to be able to see and visualize the input and output of your code in the same window. So when you are working in text analysis, you'll be able to do things like count words. You'll be able to learn how to do things like find all the adjectives, parts of speech. We'll look at an analysis of something like concordance, which is a word and the 10 words that come before and after that particular word within a corpus of text. We'll look at similarity, which means how many different similar contexts or dissimilar contexts is a particular word used. And we'll start to look at a couple little visualizations about, for example, the frequency of a word's use over the entire corpus of text that you're working with. This will then parlay you into a workshop that Zachary is going to lead.
Okay, thanks, Lisa. Yeah, so as you can see on the schedule there, the last sort of Python focused workshop we'll do is creating simulations with Python. So what this is meant to do is kind of consolidate everything you've learned so far about the language itself and to really try and apply it in a small project. So we'll focus largely on the object-oriented nature of Python as a programming language. If you don't know what that means at the moment, that's perfectly all right. We'll be talking about it in the Institute, obviously. But what we're really focusing on is, creating classes, instantiating objects from those classes, and writing your own functions and methods to then work with those objects. So what we'll do is create just a small, basic computer simulation. I can just describe it briefly. We'll create a sort of imaginary species of critter. We'll define the class of this critter. We'll create some critter objects, let them go out into the world. We'll write some functions for them to then, do all the sort of things critters do, like gather food, reproduce, all the things that species need to survive. And what we'll do is run a simulation with some other factors into account. So we'll think about, what if there's a scarcity of food in this particular year, or whether there is an ecological disaster of some kind. We'll try to model, so we'll run a simulation that year by year will then track the population growth, depending on all these different factors that we then plug into the scenario. So hopefully, by the end of it, you'll have a better understanding of how to write your own functions, which is one of the most important aspects of programming in general. And you also kind of just have a general sense of how researchers go about using simulations to sort of model and predict sort of real life processes and scenarios. So that will be kind of the final sort of project you'll be doing in the workshop. And then we move on to the project management that I think is shared with both tracks at this point.
Since it's shared with both tracks, I'll do it at the end. But one of the things that's important to know is that you don't have to be interested in just the sciences to be able to use Python. So lots of people use the skills that you will develop in each of these workshops for a variety of different purposes. And so you're learning, while we're creating it in a kind of fun and game-based way, you're learning key and core skills that will allow you to do any number of things, like working with large amounts of data, being able to go out into the world and pull in that data to do things like create website designs, all of which depend on these very foundational, fundamental concepts in Python as a language. So next, we want to turn it over to those who are teaching the R workshops. And Dee, I think you're going to start them off in that conversation.
Yes. Hi, I'm back again. So I will actually also be doing the data literacies and I won't be doing data management, but I'll also be leading the data literacies workshop with Leanne. And just to give you an overall view before I go into the intro to R, the data literacies workshop is really, where we get first experience with how to work with data and thinking about data, the stages of data, right? How do we collect data all the way to how do we share data, right? We'll also be spending some time in the data literacies workshops to think about some of the ethical dimensions of working with data, especially if those of you who might be interested in working with social media data what are some of the ethical considerations that you might want to have as you start the project, as you're going through the project, and at the end of the project. So this part of the workshop or the institute will be quite discussion based, and it is one of the workshops that is less about coding and more about thinking through the different steps and stages to get your project moving along. So in the R track, we'll start with Intro to R, where we will actually be familiarizing ourselves with R and RStudio functionalities. So getting to know what R is, how to use it in RStudio, right? Why use it in RStudio? We'll discuss some of that. And then we'll also kind of go through some of the ideas around what are objects, what are functions, what are vectors. And this is why we don't put R and don't have people take R and Python at the same time, because the definitions of objects and functions and vectors differ slightly in different programming language. So to make sure that you don't get confused if you're learning programming language for the first time, we are asking folks to choose either tracks. So that's kind of what the Intro to R will kind of get you started on, right? So making you comfortable at a level of trying to use your own data set, getting you comfortable with preparing your data for the next stages of data. So things like cleaning, wrangling, analysis, right? Which is why the R track is scheduled in this way. So with that, I'm now going to turn it over to Yuxiao, who would be talking about the data wrangling portion and the analysis portion.
Hi, I'm Yuxiao. So the next step after we learn how to use R in RStudio is to do some data wrangling, which basically means when you have a raw data coming in, and then you might have to think about how to shape them and restructure the data into the way you want. So you want to wrangle this into an interpretable format and then do some analysis on it. So we're going to introduce tidyverse, which is kind of an ecosystem of the R packages, and it can streamline this process and open up new avenues for insights. So in the data wrangling in our workshop, we will highlight the major features of the tidyverse and help new and experienced R users get a grip on the data. So you're expected to learn some functions and features like filter, sort, group, this kind of functions to manipulate your data and kind of play around with the rows and columns in the data. And then after that, we are actually, after we finish the data cleaning step, we can prepare the data for analysis. So in the data analysis, our workshop, we're gonna basically learn how to process or deal with the data in two different kind of ways. One way is to deal with the data for numerics, and the other way is to deal with the string kind of data like characters and text. So for the numbers, we're gonna learn some basic statistics tables for the data, and also learn the basic regression method for handling and also testing. For example, if you have any kind of research projects that is involved with hypothesis, involved with statistical technique. So we'll learn this thing in this data analysis, our workshop, learn how to run a regression and how to interpret the result of a basic regression, and also learn the basic summary tables of statistics of the data. And then for the other part is to deal with the strings. So we're gonna use a package that's called string_r, which is specifically for dealing with strings and text, and then do basic text processing. And you will expect to get familiar with the different functions for doing, for example, regular expression and also pattern matching. And then at the end of the day, you should be able to make a word cloud after taking this workshop. And then after that, we're gonna do another visualization or workshop. And UK is leading this workshop. So I'll let him introduce it.
Hi everyone, I'm UK. Yeah, we're gonna be working on the final day with data visualization and GIS in R. So basically these two workshops that might be merged into like one full morning, it's gonna be about getting everything that we learned from in the first workshops of R about how to manage your data, how to input your data. And now the idea is to learn how to visualize it. And so you want to have your raw data. You're going to be able to see how it is. And sometimes you want to plot it in graphics, in bar plots, in line plots, time series. You want to see how your data is structured. You're going to wrangle it in the data wrangling, and you can see how it looks like after you manage in the way that you need for your analysis. And also, when you do your analysis, if you learn some the analysis that we're going to learn on the data analysis workshop, you can also plot the results and make them appealing for publications or for websites or for anything that you want to showcase your results in. And finally, the JS is going to deal with getting those data and specializing data, getting data that are spatial, that have some coordinates associated to it, and how to do plots and maps in R and highlight the patterns that you want to see. So basically, we're going to be using two packages. ggplot is a package to do graphics, very beautiful graphics in R. And the ggplot is also going to be used to do some mapping in R. And you're also going to use the package SF in R that deals with spatial objects and how to manage them inside the R environment. That's basically it. And then we are going to the project management part in the end, which I think Liz is going to be talking about.
So we'll wrap up our week of learning together by thinking about next steps. And we're going to look at the projects that you might be interested in doing, whether you have a specific research project in mind, or you want to kind of think one up as you are going through the workshop. But in any case, what we want you to do is to come out of the last day with a plan. So you will do an assessment of what you've learned, what materials you have at your disposal, what kind of data that you might be working with, what kind of project you might be working with, what skills you don't have that you still need to learn, and then looking around the Graduate Center and other places to do an assessment of where you could pick up or acquire the skills that you need in order to move your project forward. So the objective of the week-long institute is not to give you a 100% fluency in either of the two programming languages. To do that in a week is simply impossible. But what we do want to be able to do, what we want to achieve over the course of the week, is to give you a sense of confidence in your ability to learn on your own, if you would like to. So by the end of the institute, we hope that you understand the concepts and the skills and some of the key vocabulary that's necessary in order to take some of the online tutorials with confidence and feel like you have a running start and know where to get moving. We encourage you to participate in some of our ongoing activities, like our Python user group meeting and our R user group meeting. And we demonstrate all the places around the Graduate Center where you might be able to find support for the kind of project and work that you're doing should you fall in a snag or run up against some difficulty. Where do you go to ask questions? And where do you go to find a sense of community and other people who are working in similar fields to the one that you're working in and asking similar research questions? So with that, the next thing that we want to talk about a little bit is the application. And I'm hoping that somebody will be able to drop the link for the applications into the chat and to put it up on the screen. Joanna is asking, will the data literacies and ethics course be the same for the two tracks? And yes. So what will happen is we will have our introduction and our command line and data ethics, literacies, and management workshops as one large group. Then we're going to move into the separate tracks, and then we'll come back together for data management. I'm afraid my dog Willow has some objections, so if you hear barking in the background, I apologize. So what we want to do is walk through the application very quickly. So if somebody could click on the click here to apply for the 2022 and just give me one quick second. Sorry about that. So what you'll find is that the Digital Research Institute application is a Google form. As you scroll down the Google form, you'll see that there are the pretty standard questions about names and pronouns and email addresses. It's important that we know what your GC email address is and that we have one that you're going to continue to use over and over again. The one that you check regularly, because there will be updates over January when you may not be checking your GC email regularly. So we need to know how to get a hold of you. We want to know whether or not you've applied in the past for two reasons. One is because if you applied and we're not able to get in, you bump up in the in our rankings so that we can admit people who have already applied before. And second, because if you have participated in a past institute but want to take another track, so let's say you did the Python track last time, but you want to take the R track this time, that way it alerts us to that. We want to know a little bit about the academic program that you're coming from, your academic status. None of that is a requirement. We don't look at that for evaluation purposes. We look at that primarily so that we understand the distribution of where our message is getting out and what programs are most sort of in demand of the courses that we're offering. We talk about the fact that when you participate, as Dee mentioned, in the DRI, that you are developing important skills that are scaffolded. And so we want you to demonstrate that you understand that we expect you to participate for the entire institute. And that's important for a number of reasons. One is because of that scaffolded learning trajectory. The other is because we are trying to create learning communities. And that means that when we work together and we create learning communities, we are able to find resources for solving our own problems. We learn the steps that are necessary in order to reach out and ask for help. So learning within a community is a really important part of learning how to program. And we want to make sure that everyone is equally committed to the experience. The next questions involve things like what kinds of early concepts and vocabularies you think you might be able to use to reach your professional and academic goals. In other words, if there are people in your profession who keep talking about being able to do machine learning or to perform a regression analysis or to analyze tweets, for example, you might share that with us so that we understand a little bit better what your motivation is for wanting to take the institute. Another thing that we're interested in is the kinds of materials that you might be working with. That will help us to assess for you whether or not one of the tracks might be better than another, or how much use you might get out of the kind of work that we're going to be doing in the Institute. The next question is asking about how you have solved a technical problem. And that's not necessarily an assessment question. That's a question that helps us to understand how you learn and how you respond to challenging technical situations. This helps us to form different groups that we might have, or learning communities within the Institute. It informs us about how well you'll respond to learning online versus learning face-to-face. And it gives us some valuable information about ways that we might prepare information to share with you, in the same way that when you go to the doctor's office, they might ask you, for example, do you learn better if you are reading material, if someone is telling you the material, or if you are walking through the material with somebody or having demonstrations. So this gives us a little bit of information about the kind of pedagogy that we want to bring to the Institute. We are going to ask you to choose one of the two tracks that you would prefer to participate in. And that is helpful to us because we would like to create a balanced group so that we can make sure that everyone is getting equal attention within the two tracks. And finally, we just want to make sure that you acknowledge the times and dates and that you will be present for each of them in January. If there are special circumstances, as Dee mentioned, that's not automatically disqualifying, but we would like to know, if it's a doctor's appointment or if it's something like that, then what we could do to accommodate you. The last question really is going to help us. We would like to know how you heard about the Institute and what our different publishing and outreach venues are being effective, so that we can do a better and better job each year in our ability to reach out to all students at the Graduate Center and to make sure that all people know that they have the opportunity to take this course. So now we've walked through the Institute, we've talked about the course offerings, we've talked a little bit about the 2 different tracks, we've talked a bit about the application, and you've gotten to meet the instructors for each of the different paths. So we wanted to stop here and give people a chance to ask questions. So I'm going to stop the recording, and that will allow us to post this online, and then we will post the questions that we think are most applicable to a wide audience within our FAQ, and we'll do that anonymously.